Hey there, travel enthusiasts and geography nerds. We're about to dive into the history of a place that needs no introduction, but we're gonna give it one anyway. It's got beaches, it's got sunshine, it's got enough fruity cocktails to drown a medium-sized island chain. You guessed it or read the title. We're talking about the Bahamas. Now you might be thinking, John, why are you telling me about beaches? I came here for history, not a travel brochure. And to that I say, patience, my friend. See, the Bahamas history is as rich and colorful as a Miami Vice montage. We're talking pirates, plantations, and enough political intrigue to make your head spin faster than a limbo champion after a few rum punches. But before we get to all that juicy stuff, let's set the scene. Picture this. 700 islands sprinkled across the Atlantic Ocean like someone sneezed out a handful of paradise. That's the Bahamas, folks. And trust me, it's just as beautiful as it sounds. Fun fact. The water in the Bahamas is so clear you can see your own reflection judging your life choices from last Tuesday. Okay, history buffs, time for a pop quiz. Who were the original inhabitants of the Bahamas? If you answered tourists with really good tans, you're sadly mistaken, and also need to work on your historical knowledge. The answer, my friends, is the Lucayans, a peaceful group of indigenous people who called these islands home long before sunscreen was invented. These guys were basically the OG Bahamian hipsters. They were all about sustainable living, rocking the whole fishing and farming lifestyle centuries before it became trendy. They were also known for their craftsmanship, creating intricate baskets and pottery that would make even the most dedicated Etsy shopper jealous. But sadly, the Lucayans' peaceful existence was about to get a rude awakening. Enter stage left, Christopher Columbus, looking for a new trade route to India, and probably wondering why his GPS was on the fritz. Let's just say, things didn't go so well for the Lucayans after that. Fun fact, the Lucayans were so skilled at navigating the waters around the Bahamas that they could reportedly sail between the islands using only the stars and a really good sense of direction. Take that, Google Maps. Christopher Columbus, the man who discovered America. A figure often celebrated in history books, but the reality of his voyages is far more complex and controversial. Look, we all know how that turned out. The so-called discovery was more of an invasion, and it didn't end well for the indigenous people. Spoiler alert, not great for the people already living there. The arrival of Columbus marked the beginning of a dark era for the native populations. And unfortunately, the Bahamas was his first stop on this less than triumphant tour of the New World. The islands, with their lush landscapes and clear waters, seemed like paradise. Columbus landed in the Bahamas in 1492, probably expecting a fruit basket and a spa day. Instead, he found a thriving community of Lucayans. Who were understandably a bit confused by this whole situation. They had their own way of life, their own culture, and suddenly strangers arrived. Columbus, being Columbus, decided to claim the islands for Spain, and promptly put the Lucayans to work searching for gold. This was the beginning of their exploitation. Because when you think tropical paradise, you think exploiting the locals, right? The Spanish saw the islands as a treasure trove, but at a great human cost. The Spanish, bless their conquistador hearts, weren't exactly known for their chill vibes. They were driven by greed and a sense of superiority. They saw the Lucayans as a source of free labor and treated them about as well as you'd expect. Read terribly. The indigenous people were forced into harsh conditions. Within a few decades, disease and forced labor had decimated the native population. The once thriving communities were reduced to shadows of their former selves. It's a dark chapter in Bahamian history, but one that's important to remember. The legacy of Columbus is a reminder of the impact of colonization. Fun fact, Columbus actually landed on an island in the Bahamas called San Salvador, not on the island we now know as Salvador. It's a common historical mix-up. It's like showing up to the wrong party, except instead of awkward small talk, you accidentally commit genocide. History is weird, and often it's tragic. Section 4. A pirate's life for me, and by me I mean not me, thanks. The romanticized life of a pirate. Swashbuckling adventures, hidden treasures, and the open sea. But let's be real, it wasn't all fun and games. So, the Spanish took over the Bahamas, wiped out most of the native population, and then kind of forgot about it? It's almost like they had a to-do list and just left the Bahamas unchecked. I mean, they were busy conquering other parts of the Americas, so I guess the Bahamas slipped their mind. They had bigger fish to fry, like the vast riches of the Aztec and Inca empires. This, my friends, is where things get interesting. and by interesting I mean involving a lot of pirates. With the Spanish distracted, the islands became a playground for pirates. See, with the Spanish distracted, the Bahamas became a prime location for anyone who enjoyed a good game of loot and plunder. It was like a pirate's dream come true. Pirates, privateers, you name it, they all flocked to these islands like seagulls to a dropped hot dog. The promise of untold riches and the thrill of adventure were irresistible. Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, became a notorious pirate haven, a sort of 17th century Las Vegas but with more scurvy and fewer Elvis impersonators. It was a bustling hub of pirate activity. Life as a pirate wasn't all eye patches and parrots though. It was a rough and dangerous existence, filled with constant threats from rival pirates, naval forces, and the ever-present risk of mutiny. It was a dangerous and often short-lived career path, kind of like being a contestant on a reality show hosted by a very angry parrot. The mortality rate was high, and the rewards were fleeting. But hey, at least they had good PR. The tales of their exploits spread far and wide, capturing the imaginations of people across the globe. The stories of these swashbuckling rogues have become the stuff of legend, inspiring countless books, movies, and Halloween costumes. Their legacy lives on in popular culture. Fun fact: one of the most famous pirates to sail the Bahamian seas was a woman named Anne Bonny. She defied the conventions of her time and carved out her own place in pirate history. She was known for her fierce fighting skills and her ability to rock a pirate hat like nobody's business. Anne Bonny was a force to be reckoned with. Eat your heart out, Captain Jack Sparrow. The real pirates of the Bahamas were far more fascinating and formidable than any Hollywood creation. Section 5. Under the Union Jack. Spoiler, it's less fun than it sounds. Eventually, the British got tired of sharing their tea and crumpets with a bunch of unruly pirates. Can you blame them? These pirates were not just a nuisance. They were a significant threat to the British trade routes and their economic interests in the Caribbean. The British, known for their stiff upper lip and love for order, decided enough was enough. So, in the 18th century, they decided to crack down on piracy in the Bahamas and make it a proper colony. This wasn't just a simple administrative change, it involved a series of military campaigns and strategic efforts to rid the islands of their pirate inhabitants. The British were determined to bring law and order to the region. Think of it as a hostile takeover, but instead of boardrooms and briefcases there were cannons and cutlasses. The British Navy played a crucial role in these operations, engaging in fierce battles on the high seas and along the coastlines. It was a dramatic and often violent process, but one that the British deemed necessary to secure their interests. With the pirates out of the picture, or at least relegated to the history books, the Bahamas settled into life as a British colony. This transition wasn't without its challenges, but it marked the beginning of a new era for the islands. The British set about establishing their governance structures and integrating the Bahamas into their colonial empire. This meant adopting British laws, customs, and of course, taxes. The British legal system was introduced, bringing with it a new set of rules and regulations that the local population had to adapt to. British customs and traditions also began to take root, influencing various aspects of daily life in the Bahamas. Because what's a colony without taxes? It's like a beach without sand, a pina colada without rum, or a John Oliver segment without at least one joke about the absurdity of it all. Taxes were a significant part of colonial life, funding the administration and development of the colony, but also often a source of resentment among the local population. But life under British rule wasn't all bad. The British brought with them a sense of order and stability that had been lacking during the pirate era. They also introduced various public services and infrastructure projects that improved the quality of life for many residents. The British brought with them infrastructure, education, and a whole lot of tea. Schools were established, providing education to the local children, and various public works projects were undertaken to improve the island's infrastructure. And of course, the British love for tea became a part of daily life in the Bahamas. They also, unfortunately, brought the slave trade, which cast a long shadow over the Bahamas and the rest of the Caribbean. The introduction of slavery had devastating effects on the local population and left a legacy of suffering and injustice that would last for generations. We'll talk more about that in a bit. The impact of the slave trade is a significant and tragic part of the history of the Bahamas, and it's important to understand its full implications. Fun fact, the Bahamas was actually briefly under American control during the American Revolutionary War. This period of American control was short-lived, but added another layer of complexity to the island's history. But don't worry, they got over it. Mostly. Today, the Bahamas is an independent nation, but the influences of its colonial past are still evident in many aspects of its culture and society.